The encounter in the void. The void of space was a silent, endless expanse, broken only by the faint glow of distant stars. Yarrick sat in the cockpit of the stellar horizon, his eyes scanning the readouts on the console. The ship hummed softly, a comforting sound that had been his constant companion for years. At 47, Yarrick had seen more of the galaxy than most humans ever would. But tonight, something felt different. Captain, his first officer, Lena, called from her station. "We're picking up an unusual energy signature. It's faint, but it's there." Yarrick leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "Where?" "3 clicks starboard. Near the edge of that collapsing star." Jarek's instincts kicked in. Collapsing stars were dangerous, their gravitational pull unpredictable. But if there was a ship in trouble, he couldn't ignore it. "Take us in." Slowly. The stellar horizon glided through the void, its engines barely a whisper. As they approached, the energy signature grew stronger. Soon, they could see it, a sleek, alien ship, its hull shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It was damaged, trailing plasma from its side. "Life signs?" Yarrick asked, already grabbing his emergency kit. "One," Lena replied. "Faint, but stable." Yarrick nodded. "Prep the medical bay." "I'm going in." The rescue operation was routine, at least at first. Yarrick cut through the alien ship's airlock and stepped inside. The interior was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with life, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly. It was as if the ship itself was alive. Following his scanner, Yarrick made his way to the bridge. That's where he found her. She was slumped over the control console, her armor scorched and cracked. Her skin was a deep, iridescent blue, marked with glowing patterns that shifted like starlight. Her long, silver hair was braided with strands of what looked like living metal. When she raised her head, her eyes were like molten gold. "Stay back," she warned, her voice weak but firm. It was perfect English, though her accent was unlike anything Yarrick had ever heard. Yarrick raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm here to help. My name's Yarrick. I'm the captain of the stellar horizon." She studied him for a moment, her golden eyes piercing. Then she nodded, her strength fading. "Zyra," she whispered before collapsing. Yarrick caught her just in time, his mind racing. Who was she? What was she doing out here? And why was she alone? He carried her back to the stellar horizon, where Lena was waiting in the medical bay. Together, they stabilized her, though her injuries were severe. As they worked, Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The alliance begins. Zyra's eyes fluttered open, the soft hum of the stellar horizon's medical bay filling her ears. The room was dimly lit, the walls lined with unfamiliar technology. For a moment, she panicked, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon that wasn't there. But then she remembered, the human. Yarrick. He had saved her. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the injuries she had sustained. The medical pod she was in had done its job, but she was far from fully healed. As she looked around, she noticed Yarrick sitting in a chair nearby, his head resting in his hands. He looked exhausted. "You're awake," he said, his voice soft but filled with relief. "How are you feeling?" Zyra hesitated, her golden eyes studying him. "Alive," she replied simply. "Thanks to you." Yarrick nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You gave us quite a scare. Your injuries were severe." Zyra looked down at her hands, the glowing patterns on her skin flickering faintly. "I've been through worse." There was a moment of silence as Yarrick studied her. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, her presence was both commanding and mysterious. He had so many questions, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. "My name's Yarrick," he said finally. "Captain of the stellar horizon. And you are?" Zyra, she replied, her voice steady. Of the Kale Fairy. Yarrick frowned. Kale Fairy? I've never heard of them. Zyra's expression darkened. We're a proud people. But our time has passed. I am all that remains. Yarrick's heart ached at the pain in her voice. What happened? Zyra looked away, her eyes distant. A war. A betrayal. My people were destroyed, our homeworld reduced to ash. I was sent to retrieve something, a relic that could save what's left of us. But I was pursued. My ship was damaged, and I thought it was the end. Yarrick leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. This relic, what is it? Zyra hesitated, her fingers brushing against the pendant around her neck. It was a small, intricately carved stone that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. It's called the Shard of Ilarion. It holds the knowledge and power of my people. But it's also dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could be used to destroy entire worlds. Yarrick's eyes widened. And you have it? Zyra nodded. I was tasked with bringing it to a hidden outpost, where the last of my people are waiting. But I was betrayed. The ones who destroyed my home, they want the shard. And they will stop at nothing to get it. Yarrick's mind raced. This was bigger than he had imagined. You can't do this alone. Let me help you. Zyra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with surprise. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Yarrick smiled faintly. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I've seen what happens when people turn a blind eye to suffering. I won't do that again. Zyra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But know this, if you come with me, you will be in great danger. The ones who pursue me are relentless. They will not stop until they have the shard. Yarrick's expression hardened. Then we'll make sure they never get it. The Stellar Horizon's engines hummed as they set a course for the hidden outpost. Yarrick and Zyra sat in the cockpit, the stars streaking past the viewport. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also a growing sense of trust. This outpost, Yarrick said, breaking the silence. Where is it? In the Nebula of Sorrows, Zyra replied. It's a dangerous place, filled with radiation and gravitational anomalies. But it's also the perfect hiding place. Yarrick nodded, his hands steady on the controls. We'll need to be careful. The Stellar Horizon is a good ship, but it's not built for that kind of environment. Zyra glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. Then we'll have to rely on your skills as a pilot. Yarrick chuckled. I'll do my best. As they approached the nebula, the ship's sensors began to blare warnings. The swirling clouds of gas and dust were even more treacherous than Yarrick had anticipated. The stellar horizon shuddered as it entered the nebula, the gravitational forces pulling at the ship like invisible hands. We're being followed, Lena called from her station, her voice tense. 2 ships, closing fast. Yarrick's heart sank. Zyra, is it them? Zyra's expression was grim. Yes. They found us. Yarrick's hands tightened on the controls. Hold on. This is going to get rough. The stellar horizon darted through the nebula, weaving between the swirling clouds and jagged asteroids. The pursuing ships were close behind, their weapons firing relentlessly. Yarrick's heart pounded as he maneuvered the ship, his instincts taking over. We need to lose them, Zyra said, her voice calm but urgent. If they catch us, it's over. Yarrick nodded, his eyes fixed on the viewport. I'm working on it. The ship shuddered as a blast hit the shields, the lights flickering. Yarrick's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. Then he saw it, a narrow passage through the nebula, barely wide enough for the stellar horizon to fit. Hold on, he shouted, steering the ship into the passage. The pursuing ships tried to follow, but they were too large. One of them collided with the rocks, exploding in a burst of flame. The other was forced to retreat. Yarrick let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "We're clear." Zyra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with admiration. "You're a remarkable pilot, Yarrick." Yarrick smiled faintly. "Just doing my job." The hidden outpost. The Nebula of Sorrows was a labyrinth of swirling gas and jagged rock, its treacherous terrain a constant threat to the stellar horizon. Yarrick guided the ship with precision, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension in the air. Zyra sat beside him, her golden eyes scanning the viewport for any sign of danger. "The outpost should be just ahead," Zyra said, her voice calm but filled with anticipation. "We'll need to dock quickly. The nebula's radiation is already affecting the ship's systems." Yarrick nodded, his eyes fixed on the navigation screen. "I see it. Prepare for docking." The outpost came into view, a massive structure hidden within the heart of the nebula. Its surface was covered in ancient carvings that glowed faintly, a testament to the advanced technology of Zyra's people. As they approached, the stellar horizon sensors picked up signs of life. "There are people here," Lena said, her voice filled with surprise. "Not many, but they're alive." Zyra's expression softened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "My people. They've survived." Yarrick guided the ship into the docking bay, the stellar horizon shuddering as it connected with the outpost's airlock. The moment the hatch opened, Zyra was on her feet, her movements quick and purposeful. Yarrick followed close behind, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. The outpost was eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. The walls were lined with ancient consoles, their screens flickering with faint light. As they moved deeper into the outpost, they were met by a group of Zyra's people, tall, elegant beings with skin that shimmered like starlight. "Zyra," one of them said, his voice filled with relief. "You've returned." Zyra nodded, her expression grim. "I have. But we don't have much time. The enemy is close." The leader of the group, an elder with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. "We've been waiting for you. The shard, do you have it?" Zyra reached for the pendant around her neck, holding it up for all to see. The shard of Valerian pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light, its energy filling the room. The elder's eyes widened. "At last. With this, we can rebuild." "We can." "No," Zyra interrupted, her voice firm. "The shard is too dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. We need to find another way." The elder's expression darkened. "There is no other way. The shard is our only hope." Yarrick stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Zyra's right. We can't risk it. There has to be another solution." The elder studied Yarrick for a moment, then sighed. "Very well. But we must act quickly. The enemy will not wait." The outpost was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one filled with ancient technology and artifacts. Yarrick and Zyra moved quickly, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The shard's light guided them, its energy growing stronger as they approached the heart of the outpost. "This is it," Zyra said, stopping before a massive door covered in intricate carvings. "The vault. The shard's power source is inside." Yarrick nodded, his hand resting on the door. "Let's hope it's still intact." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a chamber filled with glowing crystals and ancient machinery. In the center of the room was a pedestal, its surface covered in the same carvings as the shard. Zyra stepped forward, placing the shard on the pedestal. The room was filled with a blinding light as the shard's power was unleashed. "It's working," Zyra said, her voice filled with awe. "The shard is activating the outpost's systems." But before she could say more, the outpost shook violently, the sound of explosions echoing through the halls. Jarek's heart sank as he realized what was happening. "They're here," he said, his voice tense. "We need to move." Zyra nodded, her expression grim. "We can't let them get the shard. No matter what. The artifact's power." The outpost trembled as the enemy's forces breached its defenses, the sound of explosions and gunfire echoing through the ancient halls. Yarek and Zyra stood in the vault, the shard of Ilarion pulsing with a blinding light as it activated the outpost systems. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. "We need to get out of here," Yarek said, his voice urgent. "If they get their hands on the shard, it's over." Zyra nodded, her golden eyes filled with determination. "We can't let that happen. But we also can't leave the outpost systems vulnerable. If they gain control, they could use the shard's power to destroy entire systems." Jarek's mind raced as he tried to think of a solution. "Is there a way to shut it down? To disable the shard?" Zyra hesitated, her fingers brushing against the shard's surface. "There is, but it's dangerous. The shard's energy is unstable. If we try to disable it, it could explode." Jarek's heart sank. "So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place." Zyra's expression hardened. "Not necessarily. There's another option. We could use the shard's power to create a diversion, a burst of energy strong enough to disable their ships and buy us time to escape." Yarek frowned. "But wouldn't that also damage the outpost?" Zyra nodded. "It would. But it's the only way." Yarek took a deep breath, his mind racing. "All right. Let's do it." Zyra's hands moved swiftly over the pedestal, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings. The shard's light grew brighter, its energy pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The room was filled with a deafening hum as the shard's power built to a crescendo. "Get ready," Zyra said, her voice tense. "This is going to be close." Yarek nodded, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. "Let's do this." The enemy's forces were closing in, their footsteps echoing through the outpost's corridors. Yarek and Zyra stood at the entrance to the vault, their backs against the wall as they waited for the shard's energy to reach its peak. "Any second now," Zyra whispered, her golden eyes fixed on the shard. Jarek's heart pounded as the sound of footsteps grew louder. Then, with a deafening roar, the shard's energy was unleashed. A blinding wave of light swept through the outpost, its force knocking the enemy's forces off their feet. The outpost shook violently, the sound of explosions filling the air. "Now," Zyra shouted, grabbing Jarek's hand and pulling him toward the exit. They sprinted through the outpost's corridors, the shard's energy still pulsing around them. The enemy's forces were in disarray, their ships disabled by the shard's power. Yarek and Zyra reached the docking bay just as the outpost systems began to fail. "We need to go," Yarek said, his voice urgent. "The outpost's going to collapse." Zyra nodded, her expression grim. "Let's move." They boarded the stellar horizon, the ship's engines roaring to life as they prepared to take off. The outpost shook violently, its structure beginning to collapse as the shard's energy destabilized. "Hold on," Yarek shouted, steering the ship out of the docking bay just as the outpost exploded in a burst of light. The stellar horizon was thrown forward by the force of the explosion, its shields barely holding. Jarek's hands were steady on the controls as he guided the ship through the debris, his heart pounding in his chest. "We made it," Zyra said, her voice filled with relief. Yarek nodded, his expression grim. "For now. But they'll be back. And next time, they won't stop until they have the shard." Zyra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with determination. "Then we'll be ready. Together."